Hello, everyone. It's KP Carter, the Literacy Whisperer, and today is day one of story time with hashtag the Literacy Whisperer. So, I am the author of the Lizzie B. Hayes series. Let me hold the first one up first. The first book is Summertime with Lizzie B. Hayes, and the second book is Lizzie B. Hayes and the Great Camp Caper. Starting tomorrow, I will be reading one chapter a day from those books. It's a middle grade book about growing up during the 1960s. It's historical fiction. You will love it. But today I wanted to start with a great picture book about an artist who lived during the Harlem Renaissance time. His name is Charles White. And the name of the book is Grandpa and the Library: How Charles White Learned to Paint. I'll give you a little bit of background about Mr. White. He lived from 1918 to 1979, and he grew up and began his career in Chicago, making easel paintings and murals for the Works Progress Administration. And over the next 4 decades, he worked in vibrant cultural communities like New York, Mexico, and finally Los Angeles. Dad, where are we going? We are going to the library to see a mural painted by your Grandpa Charles. Go ahead and look. The words on the mural say love, hope, dignity, and education. This is what your grandpa believed in, and this is what he wanted to share in his art. How did Grandpa Charles become an artist? Did he start when he was very young? As young as me? Even younger, Gordon. It started when Charles, my father, was about to turn 5 years old. Your great-grandma, Marsh, she worked long days cleaning houses, and Charles was too old to go to work with her. And there were no preschools or daycare centers when your grandpa was 5 years old, and babysitters were too expensive. So she took him to the Chicago Public Library each morning with his lunchbox, and she reminded him to be polite. And then she went to work. She left him in the library all day, alone? Yes, all day. Great-Grandma Marsh assured the librarian that her son was a very well-mannered young man who would sit nicely in the corner with his books. And he did? Yes, he did. Charles liked the library. It was quiet like home. The librarians were strict like his mother. He couldn't read yet, but they gave him picture books about places he'd never been and the people who lived there. He looked at the books and watched the clock on the wall, waiting for the big hand to reach 12 and the little hand to reach 6. That was when Great-Grandma Marsh would come back. Your grandpa drew the shapes and figures he had seen in the books on pieces of scrap paper that his mother had saved for him. He loved to draw. He drew landscapes like the ones in his books and people like the ones he had seen in the magazines. He missed his mother when she was at work, and he wished he could draw her too. He thought about her cleaning windows and dusting furniture, moving quickly through the rooms of big houses. She could make a silver tray shine like a mirror. Great-Grandma Marsh began to take Charles to the Art Institute of Chicago on Saturdays. There they walked through the rooms filled with paintings by great masters. What are great masters? Great masters are artists who work very hard for a long time to be very good at what they did. From looking at their art, Charles learned that there were many things to paint and many ways to paint them. The following year, Charles started school and learned to read. In the afternoons, when school was over, he went back to the library and read every book he could. Did he stop drawing? No, he got better at it. Now he enjoyed drawing the different people he passed on the streets of Chicago as he walked home. When Charles was 7, Great-Grandma Marsh gave him a set of oil paints for Christmas. Oh, he was excited. He had never painted before. He tried them out, but grew impatient. He was confused by the materials that came with the set, the stand oil and turpentine. The paint was very different from the pencils that he used. Did he give up? Oh no. One day, when he was walking home past the Art Institute on Michigan Avenue, he saw art students in the park. They were painting landscape pictures, and they had paints just like his. He overheard one of them say that they would be painting in the park all week. So he went back to the park the next day. He watched the students carefully and observed that they mixed a little stand oil and turpentine in a container and then added the paint. Each day that week, he watched them work, and every day he learned a little more. Charles imitated them with his paint set, using cardboard cut from boxes, but the paint soaked right through the cardboard. It wasn't like the material the students used. At home, Charles noticed that the window shade in Great-Grandma Marsh's living room looked a bit like that material. He cut out a big piece and painted a landscape on it. He was an artist. He thought his mother would be so surprised. She was surprised, all right, but she was not pleased. Charles was an artist, but he had a lot more work to do. He had to think about what he wanted his work to look like and what he wanted it to be about. Charles loved the stories that he read in the library. He also loved his own family stories, which he learned from his Aunt Harriet, his Aunt Missouri, and his great Aunt Hasty. Every summer, his mother took him by train to visit them in Mississippi. They told him about his family, their mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, and about people who had been enslaved, like great Aunt Hasty. They told him about life in the South and life in the country, about working on a farm. Charles wanted to tell them stories in his pictures. As he got older and took classes at the Art Institute, he learned more about painting and drawing. He discovered how to paint his stories in ways that showed how important they were to him. He never stopped learning about art, and he never stopped studying. He kept reading, and he kept looking at art, even when he grew up. What did Grandpa paint? Grandpa painted African Americans. He painted mothers, fathers, and children. He painted people who were enslaved and the people who worked to free them. He painted writers, musicians, scientists, and leaders. He painted them marching and singing, thinking about freedom and working to make the world better. He painted important people such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Harry Belafonte, and Mahalia Jackson. He painted portraits of strangers and loved ones, scenes of struggle and triumph. He painted murals that became part of the buildings they were painted on and the cities that the buildings were in. Charles became an artist and he also became a teacher. Some of his students are now artists, just like him. He taught them how to make art and things that were important to them. He taught them that their voices, ideas, and stories were valued, and they are. And that is the end of Grandpa and the Library, How Charles White Learned to Paint. Here are some of his famous murals, just a few. And here is a picture of Charles White painting a mural. I hope you enjoyed this story time. I'm going to come to you every day and I'll be reading stories to you, and I'm going to be reading a chapter a day from Summertime with Lizzie B. Hayes and a chapter a day from Lizzie B. Hayes and the Great Camp Caper. Enjoy your life. I love you, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.